My dad skipped my mom's funeral to travel with his mistress. That night, I received a text from her number, "I'm not dead. Come to the cemetery now." I rushed there, and what I saw froze my blood. My mother's coffin was barely in the ground, the rain washing away our tears, but my father? He was already smiling for the camera in Hawaii, hand in hand with his young mistress. I thought my heart couldn't break anymore. But then, that night, a message from my mother's phone flashed across my screen. It simply read, "I'm not dead. Come to the grave now." What the hell was happening? I was utterly frozen. My name is Oliver Harris, and I'm 33 years old, living in Portland, Oregon. From the outside, my life probably looked like something out of a magazine. I had a great job as an architect, a wonderful wife, Audrey, whose smile could melt away any worry, and our 5-year-old son, Nathan, with his bright eyes and endless questions. We lived in a beautiful wooden house by the river, where morning sunlight would stream through the windows. Every morning, I'd brew coffee, listen to Audrey and Nathan's giggles, and think I was truly fortunate. But you know, no picture is ever truly perfect, no matter how carefully it's painted. Behind the brilliance of happy days, there are always shadows people try to avoid. And my shadow started with my family, with my father and mother. My father, Leonard Harris, was a huge name in Portland real estate. At 65, he still ran Harris Capital, a massive investment company. He was always polished, always in tailored suits, his voice calm but sharp, every word carefully calculated. To outsiders, he was an icon of success. To me, he was a stone wall. Cold. Unapproachable. He always made me feel like I was never quite good enough. I remember winning my first design award at 25. I was so excited, I showed it to him. He just glanced at the certificate and said, "Good job, Oliver. But working for someone else is just working for someone else." Those words cut me deep, even though I was used to him downplaying my achievements. He always saw me as just an architect, never the heir he wanted for his empire. He wanted me to take over Harris Capital, but I refused. I didn't want to live in his shadow. I didn't want to become another version of Leonard Harris. My mother, Eleanor, was the complete opposite. At 62, she still had the gentle, refined air of an art teacher. She'd retired a few years back, spending her time painting and tending to her backyard garden. Every weekend, Audrey, Nathan, and I would visit. Those afternoons were my favorite. Mom would take Nathan to the garden, teaching him how to plant wild daisies. I'd fix her bookshelves or check the plumbing. My father was usually busy with work, so he rarely joined us. In those moments, Mom would look at me, smile, and say, "You're my pride, Oliver. No matter what your father says, I know you've chosen the right path." She was always the mediator, trying to ease the tension between us. She was my light, the one who made me believe I didn't need to prove anything to anyone, not even my father. My life went on like that, balanced precariously between happy days with Audrey and Nathan, and the growing shadow of my strained relationship with my father. I tried not to think about him, his cutting words, or his disappointed looks. I told myself I had everything, a warm little family, meaningful work, and a mother who loved me unconditionally. But deep down, I knew this piece was as fragile as glass, and a single crack could shatter it all. That morning started like any other. I was at the office early, preparing for an important meeting. My phone buzzed. An unknown number. I normally wouldn't answer during a meeting, but something about the persistent ringing gave me a terrible feeling. I stepped into the hallway and picked up. "Hello, is this Mr. Oliver Harris?" A woman's voice, trembling, as if trying to stay calm. "I'm a nurse from Portland General Hospital. I'm so sorry to inform you that your mother, Mrs. Eleanor Harris, passed away this morning. She suffered a sudden cardiac arrest. We did everything we could, but..." I didn't hear the rest. Her voice faded into a distorted hum. My heart pounded, blood rushed to my ears, and the world just collapsed. "No," I whispered, my voice breaking. "No, you're mistaken, my mother can't." I was talking to myself. The nurse was still apologizing. "You're saying my mother died of a heart attack?" I asked again, my voice trembling, hoping that asking enough times would change the answer. How is that possible? My mother was healthy. She had no history of heart problems. "Yes, sir," the nurse replied, her voice softening. "I'm so sorry. Can you come to the hospital now?" I nodded, hung up, and stood there, frozen. The laughter from the meeting room, the sunlight, the traffic outside, it all felt alien, like I was trapped in a terrible dream. I don't remember how I excused myself. All I know is I rushed out, got in my car, and drove in a daze. Rain began to fall, streaking down the windshield as if the sky itself were crying with me. How could my mother be gone like that? How could someone so full of life vanish in a single moment? I couldn't accept it. My mother, the woman with the gentle smile, hands always stained with garden soil, a voice as warm as sunlight, she couldn't be gone from some senseless heart attack. I gripped the steering wheel, my chest crushed under a heavy stone. My breathing came in ragged gasps. I wanted to scream. Then memories flooded back. 10-year-old me, sitting at the kitchen table. My mother, wearing a floral apron, holding a paintbrush. "Oliver, look at this." Every line tells a story. You don't need to draw perfectly. Just draw with your heart. Those afternoons were where I found my love for architecture. But not all memories were warm. My father would walk in, his cold eyes scanning my drawings. "What's the point of all this doodling, Eleanor?" he'd say, flat, dripping with disdain. "He needs to work seriously, not daydream like you." My mother would squeeze my hand tighter, as if to tell me I didn't need to prove anything to him. But his words cut deep. Back in the present, the rain grew heavier. I grabbed my phone and dialed my father's number. It rang once, twice, 3 times, no answer. I called again and again, each unanswered ring stabbing into my chest. Why wasn't he picking up? Where was he? Did he even know about Mom? A terrible feeling stirred. My father was always in control. Could he know something I didn't? The drive to Portland General Hospital felt endless. When I finally parked, my hands were shaking so badly I could barely open the car door. I ran into the lobby, breath ragged. "Mr. Harris, this way." I was led down a long corridor. The sharp smell of antiseptic made me nauseous. At the end, I saw him. My father, Leonard Harris, in a perfectly tailored gray suit, talking to a doctor. He looked calm. Too calm. As if he were discussing a real estate deal, not the death of his wife. "Dad, what's going on? Is Mom? Is she really?" My father turned. His eyes, cold as stone. "Oliver, you're here. The doctor was just explaining. Your mother had a heart attack, a stroke. They couldn't save her." His voice was steady. Not a trace of a tremor. Not a hint of grief. I stared, searching for any sign of loss, but all I saw was an impassive wall. The doctor spoke. "I'm so sorry, Mr. Harris. Mrs. Eleanor was brought here this morning, but her heart had stopped before we could intervene. No warning signs. It was a sudden stroke." "Sudden?" I nearly shouted, startling both of them. My mother had no history of heart problems. Just a few weeks ago, she was playing with my son, planting flowers, laughing. How could she? Who brought her here? What happened? My father cut me off, his voice sharp. "That's enough, Oliver. Don't make a scene. Your mother is gone. Now we need to handle the paperwork and maintain the family's dignity. Understood?" He emphasized dignity as if that were the only thing that mattered. Dignity? My mother just died, And he's worried about dignity, asterisk. I wanted to scream, to grab him and demand answers, but I couldn't. A nurse handed me a bag of my mother's personal belongings, a small wallet, the pearl earrings she loved, and a handkerchief embroidered with daisies. I clutched the handkerchief, feeling my heart crush. The faint scent of her perfume lingered. My father turned away, pulled out his phone, and stepped into the hallway. I watched his back, a chill running down my spine. Something wasn't right. He was too calm, too detached. The woman he'd lived with for over 30 years was gone, yet he was signing papers, making calls, as if it were just another day at the office. I sank into a chair. My mother's death wasn't simple. I didn't know why, but I felt it deep in my bones. 3 days later, I stood before the cemetery. The rain had stopped, but the air was heavy and damp, as if the heavens themselves were holding their breath. I had handled everything for the funeral. My father didn't help at all. He'd called the night before, his voice curt. "I'm tied up with some paperwork for the estate. Can you handle it?" I clenched my teeth and said yes, though inside I wanted to scream. My mother was his wife. Yet he used paperwork as an excuse. I greeted relatives and my mother's old friends. Each word of condolence felt like a knife, reminding me she was truly gone. But what stung even more were the whispers. "Where's Leonard? Why isn't he here? It's strange. A husband not attending his wife's funeral." I kept my head down, trying to maintain dignity. Audrey stood by my side, gripping my hand, my anchor. Nathan, in a suit too big for him, looked around confused. "Daddy, where's Grandma?" he asked. I knelt, pulled him into my arms, fighting back tears. "Grandma, she's in a beautiful place now, buddy. She's planting daisies in heaven." He nodded, but didn't understand. How could a 5-year-old comprehend such a loss? When her coffin, covered in white daisies, was lowered into the grave, I couldn't hold back anymore. Tears streamed down my cheeks. I missed her. Her departure was too sudden, too senseless, like a book torn apart mid-story. Audrey wrapped her arms around me. "You're not alone, Oliver. I'm here. Nathan's here." I nodded, but felt hollow. I wanted to scream why. Why did she have to go? Why no explanation? I just stood there, watching as shovelfuls of earth covered the coffin, burying a part of my life along with it. My father never showed up. Not a call, not a text. Nothing. I had hoped, even a little, that he'd appear at the last moment, even if he didn't cry, just to maintain the facade of a grieving husband. But no. His absence was a slap in the face, a betrayal of everything my mother had sacrificed. That evening, back in our silent house, Audrey made me tea. "Are you okay?" she asked, her eyes full of worry. I shook my head, unable to speak. I picked up my phone, scrolling aimlessly, then opened my father's social media. I rarely did. His posts were usually just business. But this time, I froze. A photo. My father in a white suit, standing next to a young woman, far too young, maybe in her 30s. They were on a balcony, smiling brightly, wine glasses sparkling. The caption, "A new chapter in life." Blood rushed to my head. My breath caught. My mother had been buried hours ago, and my father was publicly flaunting a new chapter with a stranger. I gripped the phone, wanting to smash it. Rage erupted like wildfire. I stood and walked to the bookshelf, to an old framed wedding photo of my parents. Mom, young and radiant. Dad, stern, but I once thought he looked at her with love. I touched the frame, my fingers trembling. "Mom," I whispered. "What happened to you? Why is he doing this?" My gaze hardened. A part of my heart turned to ice. That bad feeling was no longer an undercurrent. It was a storm. My mother's death wasn't random. I had no proof, no answers, but I knew, deep in my core, that the truth was being hidden. And I, Oliver Harris, would not stop until I uncovered it all. That night, after Audrey was asleep, I sat in the living room, holding the bag of my mother's personal belongings, the wallet, the pearl earrings, the daisy handkerchief. Simple items, but they carried the weight of her entire life. I opened the wallet, my fingers brushing over an old photo of me and Nathan. Tears welled up again, but I clenched my jaw. I didn't want to cry anymore. I wanted to understand. I wanted to know why she was gone, why my father was acting as if she meant nothing. Then my phone buzzed. A sharp, cold sound that shattered the silence. My heart stopped. My mother's number appeared. Unmistakable. A short message, "I'm not dead. Come to my grave now." I froze. My hands trembled so badly I nearly dropped the phone. Was this a cruel joke? A system error? My mother was dead. I had seen her coffin lowered into the grave, felt the cold earth cover her life. So where did this message come from? I stared at the screen, then, with shaking hands, called the number back. It rang once, twice, then cut off abruptly. I called again and again, but only silence responded. A powerful instinct surged within me. A fire. I stopped thinking. I jumped up, grabbed a flashlight, threw on a raincoat, and rushed out the door. Audrey was still asleep. I didn't want to wake her. I didn't know what I was doing, only that I had to get to the cemetery. Had to find the truth. My car sped through the night. The road to the cemetery was pitch black, lit only by my headlights. I gripped the steering wheel, my heart pounding as if it might burst. The cemetery loomed before me, cold and eerie. I parked, stepped out, rain soaking my coat. The flashlight illuminated the dirt path to my mother's grave. Each step felt like it carried 1,000 pounds. I had to know. I had to see. As I approached, I froze. A figure stood there, a few meters away, right in front of the freshly covered tombstone. A frail, trembling silhouette, but achingly familiar. I aimed the flashlight. The beam lit up her face. My mother. It was her. Thinner, her hair matted from the rain, but her eyes still bright, still warm. Still my mother. I stood rooted to the spot, unable to breathe, unable to believe my eyes. This couldn't be real. My mother was dead. I had buried her. "Oliver," she whispered, her voice faint but clear. Then she broke into sobs, her frail shoulders trembling. I rushed forward, wrapping her in my arms, tears streaming uncontrollably. She felt so real. The warmth of her body, the faint scent of her perfume, the embrace I thought I'd lost forever. I trembled, crying and holding her tightly, terrified that if I let go, she'd vanish like a dream. "Mom. Mom." I could only repeat, my voice breaking. How are you alive?" She took my hand, her fingers cold but firm. She looked into my eyes, her gaze a mix of pain and resolve. "You can't tell anyone I'm alive," she whispered, voice trembling. "I'll explain everything, Oliver. I had a reason to fake my death." I was stunned. 1,000 questions flooded my mind. A plan? Who helped her? Why? And why did she choose me? Trusting me with this message? I wanted to ask, to understand, but no words came out. The rain continued to fall, cloaking us in a thin veil of mist. We stood there beside her freshly covered grave, in the dark cemetery, like two lost ghosts in a surreal story. Fear and mystery enveloped me. But in that moment, I knew one thing: my mother was alive. Suddenly, she grabbed my hand, pulling me away from the dim glow of the flashlight. "It's not safe here," she whispered, voice trembling but resolute. "Follow me, Oliver. We need to talk." I nodded, mind reeling, and followed her through the tombstones, down a narrow path leading out of the cemetery. The rain soaked through my coat, but I didn't feel the cold. Only shock, joy, and an unnamed fear coursed through me. She led me to an old, faded silver sedan, nothing like our family cars. She opened the door. I hesitated, staring at her, still unable to believe she was flesh and blood. "Mom, are you sure you're okay?" I asked. She just nodded, her eyes a mix of tenderness and tension. "Get in, son. I'll explain." We drove off into the night, my mother behind the wheel, me clutching the daisy handkerchief. The house she took me to was tucked away in a corner of Portland's outskirts, hidden behind old oak trees. A small, weathered house with a chipped roof, windows covered with heavy curtains. She turned off the engine, scanned the surroundings as if afraid someone was watching, then led me inside. The interior was sparse, almost empty. Nothing like the mansion she'd shared with my father. She poured me a glass of water, but I didn't drink. I just sat, looking at her, waiting. She sat across from me, thin hands clasped tightly. "I know you're angry," she began, her voice strained. "Angry that I hid this from you, that I let you endure the pain of losing me. But you have to understand, Oliver, I had no other choice." I shook my head, trying to suppress the surge of emotions. "Mom, why? Why did you have to do this? Why fake your death? And Dad, does he have anything to do with this?" Just mentioning him made my blood boil. That photo of him with the young woman. My mother took a deep breath, her eyes darkening as if sifting through painful memories. "It started a few months ago. Your father, he changed, Oliver. He became colder, more ruthless. I discovered he was having an affair with a young woman, Vanessa, who works at his company. He wasn't just sneaking around, he was blatant about it, as if he wanted to humiliate me." I clenched my fists. I had suspected, but hearing her confirm it felt like a punch to the chest. She continued, voice trembling with anger and pain. "When I confronted him, he didn't deny it. Instead, he threatened me. He wanted me to sign over assets, shares in the company, properties, everything in my name. He said, if I didn't agree, I'd disappear. Disappear?" I repeated, my voice choking. "You mean Dad threatened to kill you?" She nodded, eyes red with tears. I wasn't sure if he'd actually go through with it, but I felt the danger. "He started watching me, Oliver. I found hidden cameras in the bedroom, in the living room. He'd fly into rages out of nowhere, and once he even shoved me when I refused to sign the papers. One night, he lost control, screaming that I'd regret not obeying him. That's when I knew I had to protect myself." I sat in silence, feeling like the world was crumbling again. My father, the man I'd thought was merely domineering and cold. Could he be this cruel? I remembered his emotionless gaze at the hospital, the way he hurriedly signed papers, as if her death was just another task. But she wasn't done. "I had an old friend at Portland General Hospital," she said, her voice steadier now, recounting a carefully calculated plan. "Her name is Martha. I told her everything, and she agreed to help. I planned to fake a heart attack. The housekeeper didn't know, so when I collapsed, she panicked and called for help. Everything went as planned. At the hospital, Martha recorded that I had gone into cardiac arrest and helped me leave through a back exit. They used a mannequin to substitute the body. Everyone, including your father, believed I was dead." I listened, head spinning. "Mom, you planned all of this? But why didn't you tell me? Do you know how much it hurt to think you were gone?" My voice broke, torn between anger and love. I thought of the sleepless nights, the tears at the funeral. She had let me endure it all without a single hint. She lowered her head, tears streaming. "I'm sorry, Oliver. I wanted to tell you, but I couldn't take the risk. Your father, he's too dangerous. If he suspected even the slightest thing, I don't know what would have happened. I chose you because I knew you wouldn't abandon me, because you're the only one I trust." I looked at her, my heart torn in two. I pitied her, this woman who had to stage her own death to survive. But I was also angry. Angry at being kept in the dark. Angry at my father for pushing her to this point. The image of him in his perfect suit with that cold smile now felt like a threat. I'd once thought he was just controlling, but now I saw he was far more dangerous. She gripped my hand, her eyes resolute. I had no other choice, Oliver. Faking my death was the only way to survive and make him let his guard down. But now I need you. We have to uncover the truth before he finds out I'm still alive. I stood frozen. Each word from my mother cut through the shock, gripping me like a knife. Outside, the rain pounded relentlessly on the tin roof, mingling with our ragged breaths. The dim yellow light cast shadows on her gaunt face, highlighting lines of fear and resilience. I looked at her, the woman I thought I'd lost forever, and felt a fire ignite in my chest. Pain, rage, and love for my mother fused into a cold determination. I would protect her. And I would make my father, Leonard Harris, pay for what he'd done. But I knew this wasn't the time for impulsive actions. If my father was truly as dangerous as she said, we needed evidence, a solid plan. I gripped her hand tightly, my voice. Mom, I'll do whatever it takes to help you, but I need to know what you want me to do. Where do we start? She sighed, her eyes scanning the bare room. We need evidence, Oliver. Evidence of what he's done. Not just to me, but everything he's hidden in the past. Your father is careful, but he's overconfident now. He thinks I'm dead. That no one stands in his way. This is our chance. I nodded, my mind still in turmoil. I wanted to scream, to confront him, but I knew she was right. We needed to act smart, not emotional. I'll keep this secret, Mom, I said, my voice steadier than I expected. I won't tell anyone, not even Audrey or Nathan. But you have to promise me you won't disappear again. I couldn't handle losing you a second time. She gave a sad smile, gently stroking my cheek as she did when I was a child. I promise, Oliver. From now on, I won't hide anything from you. Returning home that night, I felt like I was living in two worlds. One was the warm house by the Willamette River, where Audrey and Nathan slept peacefully, where I once thought everything was perfect. The other was a dark storm where my mother had to fake her death to survive, where my father might be far more ruthless than I ever imagined. I slipped in quietly, careful not to wake Audrey. I sat in the living room, staring at the framed photo of my mother, wondering how I could keep this secret from the wife I loved. The next morning, I tried to act normal. I brewed coffee, made toast for Nathan, drove him to preschool. Audrey looked at me, her eyes full of concern. Are you okay, Oliver? You look like you haven't slept. I forced a smile. I'm fine, honey. It's just, I'm still not used to Mom being gone. Audrey hugged me, and I felt a pang of guilt. But I had promised my mother. I couldn't take the risk. Not because I didn't trust Audrey, but because any small mistake could put my mother in danger. My mother stayed hidden, contacting me only through an encrypted phone. Don't call directly, she instructed. Only text when necessary. And be careful, Oliver. Your father isn't easily fooled. While my mother lived like a ghost, my father, Leonard Harris, was reveling in a lavish lifestyle. I checked his social media, and each post stabbed my heart anew. There he was, on a yacht in California, arm around Vanessa, smiling as if he'd never lost his wife of 30 years. Another post from Vegas, freedom is living true to yourself. I gripped the phone. He was overconfident, my mother said. That was our advantage. I decided to use his absence to act. The family mansion, where I grew up, where my mother once tended her daisy garden, became my target. I knew my father had a private study where he kept important documents. If there was any evidence of what he'd done to my mother, it would be there. One evening, after Audrey and Nathan were asleep, I drove to the mansion. The night was pitch black. I still had a key, but I didn't want to turn on any lights. I stepped inside, heart pounding, feeling like a thief in my own childhood home. My father's study was on the second floor, behind a heavy oak door with an electronic lock. Luckily, I knew the code, my mother's birthday, a detail that now felt both bitter and ironic. Inside, the room was as I remembered, a large wooden desk, shelves filled with binders, the faint smell of leather. I began searching, careful not to disturb anything. The drawers were full of contracts and business documents. But I knew my father wasn't that simple. He always hid important things where no one would think to look. After nearly an hour, I noticed a panel on the wall behind the desk that seemed out of place. I tapped it. A hollow sound. My heart raced. Using a letter opener, I carefully pried the panel open. Behind it was a small, old safe with a combination lock. I tried several combinations, my father's birthday, my mother's, mine. None worked. Finally, I tried their wedding anniversary. The safe opened with a dry click. Inside was a treasure trove of dark secrets. I found bank statements showing massive transfers to offshore accounts, Switzerland, the Cayman Islands. Forged contracts with my mother's signature, transferring shares and properties I knew she'd never agreed to. But what chilled me to the bone was a small USB drive, an old stack of newspapers, and a few cassette tapes. I plugged the USB into my laptop, hands trembling. An audio file appeared, recorded over 20 years ago. I pressed play. My father's voice came through, harsh and angry. "You think you can control me forever, Charles? This fortune belongs to me, not you or your daughter." The responding voice was my grandfather's, calm but firm. "Leonard, you won't touch a cent unless Eleanor agrees. You know that." The argument escalated, my father's threats growing darker, until the recording cut off abruptly. I opened the stack of newspapers, my heart pounding. They were local papers from over 20 years ago, with headlines about a car accident that killed my grandparents. My mother had told me, her voice heavy with grief, that they died during a business trip. At the time, I thought it was a random tragedy. But now, piecing together the recording, my father's resentful tone, and the timing of the accident just days later, I began to suspect. Was my father directly involved? Did he do something to seize my mother's inheritance? I photographed everything, backing up the data. Then I drove back to the suburban house, my heart heavy. When I told my mother, she sat silently, trembling hands clutching her glass of water. "I always suspected," she whispered, tears streaming down her face. "I always felt my parents' deaths weren't normal, but I had no proof, and I couldn't bring myself to believe Leonard could go that far." I took her hand, feeling the world crumble again. "Mom, we're not just dealing with a cheating husband," I said, my voice shaking with anger. "We're dealing with someone who might have been hiding crimes for 20 years. She nodded, her eyes no longer just filled with sorrow, but burning with resolve. "We'll expose him, Oliver. For me, for you, and for everyone he's hurt." I looked at her, a woman who had endured so much, and felt a fire ignite in my chest. Not blind rage, but cold, sharpened determination. My father, Leonard Harris, had built an empire on lies, betrayal, and possibly crimes I hadn't dared to imagine. But now, he would face the truth. And my mother and I would be the ones to pull back the curtain. I gripped her hand, my voice firm. "Mom, we'll do this the right way. No impulsiveness. No letting emotions take over. We need to build a solid case so when he falls, he won't get back up." She gave a faint but steadfast smile. "You're truly my son, Oliver. Always thorough, always thinking before acting. I know someone who can help us. Charlotte Wells, a lawyer specializing in finance and estates. She was my best friend in college. If anyone knows how to deal with men like your father, it's Charlotte." I nodded, feeling a spark of hope. "So, where do we start, Mom?" "The documents I found, the bank statements, forged contracts, the recording, are they enough?" "They're enough to start," she said, her eyes lighting up. But we need more. Your father is careful. He won't let himself be caught easily. We need additional evidence, and we need to do everything legally so when the truth comes out, he can't escape. The days that followed felt like I was living two lives. By day, I was still Oliver Harris, architect, husband, father. But by night, I became someone else, a truth seeker, quietly piecing together the puzzle to dismantle my father's empire. Meanwhile, my father seemed utterly unaware. I monitored him through social media. Each photo was a stab to my heart, but also an opportunity. He was overconfident, believing he'd escaped all constraints. That my mother was dead and no one could stand in his way. He didn't know that every move was being watched, that each smug smile only fueled my determination. I contacted Charlotte Wells. We met at a small cafe. Charlotte was a woman in her 50s with short silver hair and eyes as sharp as a hawk's. As I recounted my mother's story, the fake death, my father's threats, the documents, she listened intently, taking notes. When I handed her copies of the bank statements, forged contracts, and the recordings, she finally spoke. This is a big case. Leonard Harris isn't just an adulterer. If what you're saying is true, he could be running an illegal financial network. But we need more evidence, and we need to do this by the book. Charlotte began organizing the documents, turning my scattered pieces into a coherent internal investigation file. She categorized the bank statements, scrutinized the forged contracts, and hired an audio expert to verify the recording. This recording is crucial, she said. It shows Leonard's intent, but we need to tie it to specific actions. Can you get more data from his company? I knew it was dangerous, but I nodded. Harris Capital was a fortress. But I had an advantage. I was Leonard Harris's son. Though he never saw me as his heir, I still had limited access to some company systems. One evening, I went to Harris Capital's headquarters, pretending to retrieve old design documents. The security guard, Frank, greeted me warmly. "Haven't seen you in a while, Oliver." I smiled, hiding my tension. "Yeah, just grabbing some blueprints. Dad asked me to check an old project." Frank let me in without suspicion. I went straight to my father's office. I sat at his desk, powered on his computer, and used a backup password I'd seen him enter. Luckily, it still worked. I sifted through files, heart pounding with every sound. Then, I found a hidden folder, encrypted. I tried several combinations, to no avail. Finally, I typed Vanessa. The folder unlocked. Inside were countless emails, invoices, and records of anonymous offshore investment funds. My eyes lit up. This was gold. I copied everything to a USB drive, my hands shaking so badly I nearly dropped it. This was evidence of under-the-table transactions. Money that never appeared in Harris Capital's official books. Meanwhile, my mother worked from her end. She secretly contacted an old friend in the tax authority, a man named Robert, who had worked under my grandfather. She sent him copies of the documents I'd found. A few days later, Robert called back, his voice grave. "Eleanor, what you sent me is a bombshell. Leonard has 4 offshore accounts totaling over $30 million, unreported. This is clear evidence of money laundering and tax evasion. I'll pass this to federal agencies, but you and Oliver need to be careful. If Leonard finds out what you're doing, he won't hold back." Charlotte accelerated the process. She filed an anonymous complaint with the SEC and the IRS, while initiating a temporary asset freeze on Leonard. "He won't know what's happening until it's too late," she said, her eyes gleaming like a warrior. "We're planting a legal bomb under his feet, and it's about to go off." In the meantime, I decided to stir things up on social media. Using an anonymous account, I began leaking hints about Harris Capital, vague suggestions of investment fraud, questions about the origins of Leonard Harris's wealth. I didn't directly accuse him, letting the press and public dig deeper. Soon, Articles started appearing. Is Harris Capital hiding something? Questions surrounding the transparency of a real estate empire. Shareholders grew uneasy. The company's stock dipped, and I knew my father was starting to feel the pressure. One morning, a message from Charlotte. The FBI has launched a federal investigation. They're reviewing all the documents we sent. Leonard doesn't know yet, but he'll be summoned soon. I sank into a chair, gripping my phone, and whispered to myself, now he'll know what it feels like to lose control. My father continued his vacation. I saw his latest post, a photo of him on a beach, cocktail in hand. But I also saw other news. Reporters were starting to swarm him, asking questions about Harris Capital, offshore accounts, and fraud allegations. He still smiled, brushing off the questions, but I knew that smile masked panic. He was losing control. And for the first time in my life, I felt like I held the upper hand. I called my mother, my voice trembling with excitement and anxiety. Mom, everything's falling into place. The FBI is involved. He won't get away. She was silent for a moment, then spoke, her voice both resolute and pained. Good, Oliver. But remember, this isn't about revenge. This is about justice. For me, for your grandparents, and for everything he's destroyed. I nodded, though she couldn't see me. Justice. The word echoed in my mind, a guiding flame. The days that followed saw the legal storm we had quietly planted finally erupt. One morning, I turned on the TV and saw my father's face on the local news. Leonard Harris, chairman of Harris Capital, accused of investment fraud and money laundering. The anchor's voice rang out, cold and sharp. Major newspapers echoed the story, real estate empire collapses, the dark secrets of Leonard Harris. I sat silently, clutching my coffee mug, feeling both relief and tension. Harris Capital plunged into crisis. My father's bank accounts were frozen. His strategic partners, who once clapped him on the back at lavish parties, swiftly withdrew investments and canceled contracts. The company's stock plummeted. Social media was flooded with critical posts. My father, the man who always controlled everything, was now cornered like a beast. I imagined him somewhere, reading the headlines, realizing his empire was crumbling. A message from Charlotte. Leonard has returned to Portland. He's trying to contact lawyers, but no one will take his case. The FBI is about to issue an arrest warrant. Be ready, Oliver. This will be over soon. My heart pounded. Over. The word sounded both sweet and terrifying. I wanted my father to pay, but I couldn't deny that he had once been my father. That afternoon, my phone buzzed. It was him. I stared at his name, my heart seeming to stop. I answered, my voice cold. Dad. Oliver. His voice was hoarse, lacking its usual calm. Have you seen the news? It's all lies. They're trying to ruin me. You have to help me, Oliver. I listened to him, each word like a knife. He didn't ask about Mom, didn't mention her death, didn't show a shred of remorse. Just the panic of a man losing everything. I took a deep breath, keeping my voice steady. Dad, I'm not sure what I can do, but if you want, we can meet and talk face to face at the mansion tonight. He was silent for a moment, then agreed, his voice thick with suspicion. Fine. 8 o'clock. Don't let me down, Oliver. I hung up, my hands trembling. This was the opportunity. Not just to confront him, but to show him the truth. That Mom was alive, that his crimes had been exposed. I texted my mother, tonight at the mansion. Are you ready? She replied instantly, I'm ready, Oliver. But be careful. He won't accept defeat easily. At 8 o'clock, I stood before the family mansion, the place that had once been my home, my mother's, and even my father's. It now felt cold, a shadow of its past. I stepped inside, turned on the light, and felt like I was entering a battlefield. My father was already there, sitting in the living room. His gray suit wrinkled, his eyes bloodshot. A glass of whiskey sat before him, but he didn't drink. Just stared into the amber liquid as if searching for answers. "Oliver," he said, his voice weary. "You're here. I need your help. The company is collapsing, and it's all because of jealous rivals. You have to stand by me." I stood still, looking at the man who had once been a symbol of power. Now he seemed small, frail, like a wounded animal. But I felt no pity, only rage. "Dad," I said, my voice icy. "Before we talk about the company, don't you have anything to say about Mom? About what you did to her?" He frowned, a flicker of weariness in his eyes. "Your mother is dead, Oliver. You know that. Don't drag up the past to blame me." I gave a faint, bitter smile. "Dead? Are you sure?" I turned and opened the living room door, and my mother stepped in. Eleanor Harris. Flesh and blood. She stood there, frail but resolute, her eyes blazing as they locked onto my father. He staggered back, the whiskey glass falling to the floor and shattering. He nearly collapsed, clutching the chair, his face pale as if he'd seen a ghost. "Eleanor," he whispered, his voice trembling. "No, it's impossible. You're dead." My mother stepped forward, her voice sharp and cold. "Leonard, did you think you could kill me so easily? Did you think you could take everything, my assets, my family, even my life, without paying a price?" He shook his head, his eyes darting between panic and anger. "What are you talking about? Is this some kind of joke? Oliver, you're behind this, aren't you? You two are conspiring to frame me." I stepped forward, standing beside my mother, my voice calm but heavy. "Dad, stop pretending. We know everything. The offshore accounts, the forged contracts, how you threatened Mom to seize her assets. And then there's my grandparents. Did you think their car accident would stay a secret forever?" My mother continued, her voice trembling with pain. "Leonard, I once loved you. I thought you were just ambitious, but you killed my parents, didn't you? For their fortune? And you planned to do the same to me." He laughed, but it was a hollow, desperate sound. "You're both insane. I didn't kill anyone. It was an accident. And you, Eleanor, you think you can stage a fake death to ruin me? You have no proof." I pulled out my phone and played the audio file. The argument between him and my grandfather from over 20 years ago. His voice filled with resentment, threatening my grandfather over the fortune. As he listened, his face paled, but he still tried to shout, "That proves nothing. You're slandering me." But before he could say more, the wail of police sirens sounded outside. The door burst open and federal agents stormed in, guns holstered, eyes cold. An officer stepped forward, holding up an arrest warrant. "Leonard Harris, you're under arrest for money laundering, investment fraud, and accessory to murder." He was handcuffed right there, in the house that had once been a symbol of his power. Reporters were already waiting outside, cameras flashing, capturing the moment the man once hailed as Portland's icon of success was led away like a criminal. As he was escorted out, my father turned back, his eyes a mix of hatred and desperation. "You'll regret this, Eleanor," he growled. But my mother stood there, silent. Her eyes no longer filled with pain, but with the resolve of someone who had won. That was only the beginning. The case against Leonard Harris quickly became a national media frenzy. Morning and evening news, major newspapers, viral social media posts, all focused on him. No longer the successful entrepreneur, but the mastermind of a dark financial network. The charges were laid out clearly: money laundering, investment fraud, tax evasion, and accessory to the deaths of my grandparents. My mother and I were called as key witnesses. The day we entered the courtroom, my heart pounded, not out of fear, but from the realization that this was the final moment to confront my father. The room was packed with people, reporters, lawyers, former business partners, now looking at him with unfamiliar eyes. He sat in the defendant's chair, his gray suit wrinkled, his hair noticeably whiter, his face gaunt. He didn't look at me or my mother. He only stared down, his eyes empty. When my mother took the stand, I saw her stronger than ever. She recounted everything: the years of threats, the times he pressured her to sign documents, her suspicions about my grandparents' deaths. Her voice didn't waver, didn't falter, as if all her pain had transformed into strength. "I had to fake my death to survive," she said, looking directly at my father. "But I didn't do this for revenge. I did it to protect my son. To protect what was left of my family." My father lowered his head further, offering no response, no defense. I knew he had nothing left to say. When it was my turn, I stood and looked at my father one last time. "You once said I wasn't good enough," I said, my voice calm but sharp. "But I don't need your approval. I just need my mother to be safe, and the truth to be revealed." He finally looked up, his eyes hollow, as if his soul had abandoned his body. I didn't know if he felt remorse, but I knew one thing: the man before me was no longer my father. The trial ended with a 30-year prison sentence. All of my father's assets were seized, and Harris Capital officially went bankrupt. The dark financial network he had built over years was completely dismantled. The press called it the biggest scandal Portland had ever seen. But for me, it wasn't just a case. It was the end of a nightmare and the beginning of a new chapter. After the trial, my mother and I became the center of attention. The media dubbed her the woman who returned from the dead. But my mother, with her gentle but resolute nature, chose to step away from the spotlight. She sold the old mansion, the place that had been a home but also a prison in her final years with my father. The proceeds were donated to a foundation supporting women affected by domestic abuse and financial manipulation. "I don't need that house anymore," she told me, her voice soft. "It only reminds me of the days I lived in fear." She moved to a small house on the Oregon coast where she lived peacefully, planting wild daisies and painting. Each time I visited, I saw her in the garden, hands covered in dirt, her smile as radiant as ever. She taught local children how to paint, sharing stories about finding beauty in simple things. Watching her, I knew she had reclaimed herself. No longer a shadow of Leonard Harris. I changed, too. I left urban vision. I no longer wanted to be tied to large corporations. Instead, I opened a small studio called Eleanor Designs, specializing in green spaces and community housing. My goal was simple: build homes that people would never fear returning to. Each project was a way to heal, not just for myself, but for others who had lived in houses full of wounds, like my mother and me. When Audrey learned the full truth about my mother and what I had done, she was speechless with shock. "Oliver, why didn't you tell me?" she asked, her eyes red with tears. I took her hand, apologized, and explained that I didn't want to pull her into danger. She hugged me, whispering, "I'm proud of you, but don't ever hide anything from me again, okay?" I nodded, feeling a weight lift from my chest. Audrey and Nathan remained my greatest anchors. We visited my mother often. Trips to the Oregon coast became a joy for the whole family. Nathan ran through her daisy garden, laughing as she taught him how to draw a dinosaur. Audrey and my mother sat on the porch, sipping tea and chatting like old friends. Watching them, my heart warmed. This was my family. Not perfect, not glamorous, but filled with love and sincerity. As time passed, the case of Leonard Harris faded into the background. But its echoes lingered deeply in my mind. Whenever I drove past the old Harris Capitol building, now just an empty concrete shell, I no longer felt hatred. Instead, I felt a twinge of regret, not for my father, but for the man he could have been. He had everything: a family, a career, the chance to live a meaningful life. But he chose greed, betrayal, and ultimately lost himself. I began writing my story, not for the world to read, but for Nathan. One day, when he's older, I want him to read it and understand that life isn't just about what you achieve, but how you face its challenges. And I wrote about the greatest lesson I learned. Justice isn't about retaliation, but about daring to stand up for what's right, even when it means standing against your own family. Nathan, my little son, is my brightest light. I spend more time with him now, teaching him about honesty, kindness, and protecting those who are vulnerable. One day, while we were drawing in my mother's garden, Nathan looked up and asked, "Dad, is Grandma a superhero? She beat the bad guy." I laughed, ruffling his hair. "You're right, buddy. Grandma is a superhero. But not because she beat the bad guy. She's a superhero because she never gave up, no matter how tough life got." Those afternoons with my family, under the fiery red sunsets of the Oregon coast, taught me the true value of happiness. It doesn't lie in extravagant parties, towering skyscrapers, or the approval of others. Happiness is sitting with Audrey, listening to her talk about a patient she helped overcome their pain. It's watching Nathan run and laugh, carefree. It's looking at my mother, the woman who came back from the dead, and seeing her live true to herself. One evening, as we sat around the dinner table in my mother's seaside home, I looked up into the eyes of Audrey, Nathan, and my mother. My voice was hoarse but filled with emotion. I used to think happiness was about achieving success, about being recognized by others. But after everything I've learned, happiness is living without fear. It's being able to hold your head high and say, "I didn't betray my conscience." My mother took my hand, her eyes shining. "You've made me proud, Oliver," she said. Audrey smiled, resting her hand on my shoulder, and Nathan, with strawberry jam still on his lips, chimed in, "Dad's my superhero." We burst into laughter. And in that moment, I knew that no matter how painful the past had been, we had found light. We had found each other. So, I'm curious. If you found yourself in a situation like this, facing betrayal, injustice, and a choice between family loyalty and doing what's right, what would you have done? Or have you ever had to keep a massive, life-altering secret from the people you love to protect someone? Tell me what you think. I really want to know.